Voting rights compromise. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. It does appear now that Democrats in Congress, both progressives and centrists, have coalesced around some sort of voting rights bill that essentially gets rid of some of the more contentious elements from the original bill, including restructuring the Federal Election Commission. Instead, the focus will now be largely on simply making sure there is ballot access. Let's get reaction to this. Tiffany Muller is president of the anti-corruption group and Citizens United. Tiffany, thanks for joining us. What's your reaction to this compromise that seems to be emerging?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on today. And we're really thrilled about this bill. I mean, it does all of the major things that we need to address to help protect our democracy. So it makes sure that everyone's freedom to vote is protected and that no matter where you live, no matter who you are, you can access the ballot box. Number two, it ends partisan gerrymandering so that voters are choosing their elected officials and not the other way around. And it ends dark money in politics so that billionaires can no longer buy our elections. So we are very happy about this compromise. We're happy that we have a unanimous support among the Senate Democrats, and we're ready to get this bill passed.
Some of the items include 15 days of consecutive voting, ensuring that all voters can request to vote by mail, establish some new automatic voter registration, and have election day become a national holiday. Of these, which in your estimation is the toughest sell for critics of voting rights legislation?
Well, none of these should be a tough sell. These are all common sense solutions that have broad support among the American people. Democrats, Republicans, independents all support these issues and have seen them implemented in states from Utah to Arizona to Colorado and West Virginia, since we're, I'm sure, going to talk about that. The Senator Manchin helped lead this compromise. So this has broad bipartisan support across the country. And all it does is make it easier to vote and protect the freedom to the ballot box.
Now, what's not in it, as we said, restructuring the Federal Election Commission. What is it that needs to be restructured about the Federal Election Commission? And if you don't do that, how big a setback is it?
Well, look, right now the Federal Election Commission has a 6% commission that too often ties along party lines, a 3-3 deadlock that doesn't allow anything to be done. So even in blatant cases where it is clear that someone's violated the law, that law isn't being enforced. So while the restructuring the commission from 6 commissioners down to 5, which is something that we really wanted to see, is no longer in this bill, what is in this bill is actually increasing the authority of the general counsel and making sure that we are actually giving the Federal Elections Commission more authority to enforce the law as it's written.
You mentioned West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, a centrist by most accounts and something of a thorn in the side to the Biden administration and certainly a lot of progressives on countless issues. How significant is his support for this compromise, and were you surprised by it?
Well, Senator Manchin's a former Secretary of State and former governor who has long cared about these issues. And he actually helped lead the efforts to find this compromise over the August recess. So what it shows is that, again, from Democrats to Republicans to independents, these are common sense solutions, and we can find unanimous support among Democrats. Right now, the problem is the Republican obstruction that we're seeing in the Republican caucus from Senator Mitch McConnell and his allies. So we need to make sure that we do whatever it takes to get this bill passed so that we can stop the attacks that we're seeing across the country on our democracy.
And to be clear, will it require 60 votes simply to bring up a vote because of how this bill is structured? In other words, you'll need 9 Republicans?
Well, currently that is where we're at, is that it would require 60 votes to overcome a filibuster. And we have seen Republicans already filibuster these bills twice, right? And actually have no one in the Republican caucus support it. But here's the thing. The filibuster has been reformed many times throughout the years, including for things like being able to pass corporate tax cuts that the Republicans passed a few years ago, or executive nominations or Supreme Court justices. Surely, if it only takes a simple majority of the Senate to give away $2 trillion in tax cuts to corporations and the wealthiest individuals in America, surely we can make it to where it only takes a simple majority to protect the foundations of our democracy.
So it sounds like you're saying that if Democrats cannot get the 9 Republicans to come along and they can't break the 60 vote threshold and there is a filibuster, that it sounds like you're suggesting that at that point, Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, all the other Democrats need to go along with a filibuster carve out, essentially eliminating the filibuster for this particular legislation.
Senator Manchin himself has said that inaction is not an option. And what we're seeing across the country right now shows how urgent this issue really is. So there's been 400 bills introduced in state legislatures that would roll back voting rights. We're seeing gerrymandered maps coming out every week right now that would just take Republicans and put them more in the majority. And so we know that the filibuster has been changed and has used exceptions 160 times in the last 20 years. And so we know that we can carve out an exception and make sure that we can figure out a way to get this bill passed. It is that important. We have to do it.
Tiffany, some Americans, of course, may be very familiar with some of the state rollbacks, particularly, for example, not allowing you to bring water or refreshments to somebody who's waiting in a lengthy voting line. Is there anything in this federal legislation that would address that?
It does, actually. The Freedom to Vote Act says that you cannot criminalize taking food or water to people who are waiting in line. Look, it is voter suppression, particularly aimed at Black and brown communities, that has created those long lines in so many places throughout the country, where we see 12-hour lines of people in Atlanta, Georgia, waiting to vote. And the fact that what they have now tried to do is make waiting in that line even more uncomfortable or even dangerous for people waiting in that line shows that the cruelty really is the point. So this bill actually would make sure that no states can criminalize handing out food or water to people who are waiting in line.
And given the clashes between some of these state laws and this federal legislation, if it passes, any fears in terms of the court battle that would ensue, given that the Constitution does seem to give a lot of power to states in terms of how they conduct their elections?
But the courts have found throughout the years that Congress has the right to set standards for federal elections. And that is what this does. This puts national standards in place so that whether you live in Maine or West Virginia or Arizona or wherever you live, whoever you are, whatever race you are allowed to have equal access to the ballot box. That's what this is about. It really is that common sense. It's making sure that we're giving the power back to the people and that their voices and their votes are heard.
Tiffany, would you be open to having this legislation open to Republican amendments? And the reason being, of course, is that some Republicans say, hey, they have some ideas on how to crack down on what they see as potential fraud, making it perhaps putting more of a burden on people to prove who they say they are. Is that the sort of thing that you think should be welcome in this legislation?
Look, I think that first of all, there have already been Republican amendments incorporated and Republican ideas incorporated into this bill. During the markup in the Senate Rules Committee, there were, I think, 9 different Republican amendments that were actually incorporated into this bill. But here's the other thing we're seeing. We're not seeing Republicans come to the table to negotiate in good faith. We're seeing an all-out partisan attack on the right to vote and on redistricting across the country, all being fueled by dark money special interests. And it's all about who gets to vote and how Republicans right now think that they are going to win elections. We saw that same dark money and these same special interests fuel the big lie prior to the 2020 election and lead to the January 6th insurrection. So this is not Republicans coming to the table in good faith to negotiate this. This is an all-out attack on our democracy by one party, and Democrats must stand up and act and pass this bill to protect it.
And the strategy behind that attack now, and we saw before the California recall, was to claim fraud even before the election has happened. Would it help Democrats and the American people to provide some measures in this legislation that provides for more transparency, even more transparency in terms of the tabulation and how tabulation systems are conducted, so that people who don't understand the system or worry, okay, I want to make sure these votes are being counted the right way, that they get some satisfaction, some confidence in this as well?
There are some really great election security measures in this bill. Everything from actual real audits to making sure that we have paper ballots so that voters can verify how they voted and that their vote is going to count the right way, to cybersecurity, because we've obviously seen foreign governments and foreign actors trying to influence our elections. So election security is a very real threat. You know what else this bill does? It also cracks down on the online misinformation and disinformation that right now Republicans are specializing in, and that we have to crack down on in order to restore faith and trust in our government.
Tiffany, real quickly in the final seconds we have you, are you very optimistic that this will get through?
I actually am really optimistic that we're going to be able to get this done. And for any of your viewers who want to get involved and raise their voices, you can go to actforthepeople.com, actforthepeople.com, and you can get connected to your senators and tell them to pass this bill.
Tiffany Muller, she's the president of the anti-corruption group End Citizens United. Tiffany, thanks for joining us and explaining some of this to us, and good luck to you and your organization as this legislation winds its way through Congress. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You got it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.